We are back with a post-U.S. Open show, and I am pumped. Jax Forrest is here, and we've been kind of wanting to do this for a while, and I always try to time it when it's right, and I don't know the timing's ever going to be more right than after this weekend for you.
Yeah, it was crazy to say the least.
Yeah, and you've had a crazy couple of months. It's like you commit to Oklahoma State, you have the high
Uh-huh.
school success, different tournaments, and then this weekend was crazy. And we'll talk about it in a minute, but like you even switching from juniors to seniors, and how that, I guess let's start there because that's kind of a good segue. Less than
hmm
2 weeks ago, you decide that initially registered for U20s slash juniors, you're like, no, I'm going to go seniors. What went into that decision?
Yeah, it was just, it was always kind of in the back of my head. It was always not necessarily an option, but I kind of had that like lingering feeling like I want to do this. There was what, four or five national champs. I want to wrestle the best. The youth, some of the guys like Marcus and Ben that I thought were going to be that could be in the U20, they weren't there, and I was just, my training had been going really well. I'd had some ups in training and some downs, which I think is, what you need to, in order to peak. But I felt really good. I was training in Stillwater, talking to Coach David, talking to my dad, talking to Coach Jody, all the people that just helped me, and they were all like really supportive of it. And I think it just came back to, this was my only chance to try and make the senior team. And if it wouldn't have gone as it did, I would have still had the chance to go to Ohio and then wrestle there. So it was really a it was really a win-win, or not necessarily win-win, but it was a no-lose situation.
Yeah.
I would have had a chance to, reach my goals regardless.
Yeah, it's funny because then Bo Bassett kind of does the opposite. Like he goes
Mhm.
U20s this weekend,
Yeah.
thinking he'll go seniors next weekend.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned Taylor and his kind of impact already, and it was just 2.5 months ago you committed to Oklahoma State. I'm curious, like, how has that already impacted your wrestling? It sounds like even going seniors this weekend, like we'll talk about the matches and the results in a minute, but it seems like
Mhm.
that commitment already has had an impact on what you're doing.
Yeah, I think I really am just trying to just almost dumb myself down, make sure I'm coming in here with, no ego. I believe everything they're going to say is going to be true. And I'm just putting my whole trust into them,
Yeah,
and, whether I would have won or lost, I think I would have kept doing the same thing because it's one of the things you're going to break through eventually. But, I was just, another one was Lee Roper. He was just announced a couple weeks ago, and he was down there, and I heard really good things about him, but never really talked to him. But I just went in, talked to him for a while one day. Just trying to pick his brain and just try and be the best version of myself. Just like I said, not just fully trusting these people that they know what they're doing and that they're the best for me. Obviously, that's why I committed there. And right off the beginning, I was there the 10 days before the open, and the way I was wrestling, the techniques I was hitting, the strategies was stuff I learned in the past 10 days,
that's
so,
wild.
and not only, the coaches, but also the partners. Like, I mean, going with Dayton, me and Dayton are really, really close. He's one of my favorite people, on this earth. And so it's one of those things, we're going to keep helping each other regardless if we're in the same weight or not. There's nothing, you know, more to it than, we're just trying to reach our goals. And on top of that, Roman, you have Joey. Me and Joey were wrestling a lot this past week. And then all the coaches. I mean, it's like a perfect room for me. And, I saw what I could do in 10 days there. And, I'm just, excited for the future. See what I can do in 4 years, 8 years, 10 years.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about Oklahoma State, but to talk about
hmm
the U.S. Open, in the quarters, you beat Nashawn Garrett, and it's kind of crazy because you mentioned about the NCAA champs in there, and you mentioned these guys like Nashawn Garrett, you tech him 11-1, and after a match or two on the backside, he retires. And it's crazy
hmm
when you see the juxtaposition of the young guys like you coming in, and it wasn't even just you at this weight. Like I've made that one graphic where it's like it's you, it's Marcus, it's Davino, like all these young guys with so
Yeah.
much talent. And you saw Nashon retire, you saw Nico Megaludas retire. What's it like when you're entering these tournaments and then these older guys are retiring now?
Yeah, it's just I mean, it's sad to see them go. Obviously, I'm still 18. I've watched these guys when I was young. I would, be sitting in the living room watching NCAAs, scream my head off with my dad. And, to it's one of those things for anything, if there's somebody you look up to or somebody you know personally, like I know Nashon personally, after my finals match, he was one of the most excited guys that I saw. I walked back there and he was so happy, hugging me and everything. And Nico's another one. I train with Nico a lot. The whole weight class, and that's why just wrestling is so just amazing, and I love it because regardless if we're in the same weight, these guys are, they had their time. They're moving on with their life, but they're still like they still want to help me, and they still said like if I need anything that they're there. And it's weird, obviously, seeing them leaving and the younger guys kind of placing and then winning and then all the coming up and not necessarily taking over where you still have guys like Seth who are older and still
Yeah.
really dang good. But it's a weird feeling. But I guess that's just the part of the circle of life in the wrestling world.
What was your mindset heading into this weekend when you have that mix of both veterans, but then you also see the bracket? And you mentioned like guys like Davino, Blaze weren't going U20s, and you have such a mix where it's like you have those veterans, you have Gross and Megaludis and even Daton, all these guys, but you also have the young guys. What's kind of your perspective or mindset heading into the weekend?
Yeah, I was just trying to I think part of the reason I was able to do good and do how I did was because I signed up later. I wasn't thinking about like during my training, I wasn't thinking about wrestling these guys. I was thinking about, doing U20s and trying to dominate U20s and, just doing what's right in front of me and not trying to wish for anything else. And so I think and then once it was time where I did switch, that's when you're kind of you're that week, you're just focused on, your weight's good, you're feeling good, you're not really worried about anything. So, I saw things coming out that I was gonna have Nashon. And so that's kind of the first thing. I wasn't looking at anything past Nashon. So Nashon was the guy I was like talking to my dad about, talking to my coaches about like, all right, so what do I need to do here and here? And then I knew Ben was going to be there. I didn't know obviously how the brackets were going to shake up and I was going to have
Yeah.
him, but I'm familiar with him. He beat me. I beat him before. He's beat me twice, and I guess now it's 2-2. But I mean, he's really good. He was one of the guys I was hanging out with on my visit to Ohio State. We got along really well there. So, I really like him, and it's one of those things. I wrestled old guys, young guys, everything in between. So, it's same mindset going into every match. I'm trying to hit my moves and I'm trying to, ultimately win.
Yeah. And speaking of all the guys in the middle, like Seth Gross, I feel like he's like 25,
Mm.
26. He's kind of in the middle. Like you got the 18,
Mm.
19, 20 year olds and you got the 30 year olds, Gross right in the middle. And that finals match, man, was crazy. Right off the
Uh-huh.
whistle, he shoots in, he gets two. I think then he goes up 6-2. And then you
Yep.
make it 6-6 like this, and the next thing you know, you blink and you tech them and you win 19-8, which is
Yeah,
so impressive. And it's always funny when I put a graphic out like that, and the comments are like, "Not surprised, not shocked," like because your
I was.
That's what I'm always like. Listen, this is an upset, or this is this, and it's like, but you have those faithful fans that know how good you are. Talk me through that match and like what was your reaction to kind of what you were doing and what you did.
Yeah, I was. I mean, right off the beginning, I was talking to my dad. I was like, he's really tricky. He's really good in all these positions. And he was like, all right, so here's a couple core things you got to do. And right off the beginning of the match, I did the exact opposite. I was kind of standing still. I wasn't expecting him to shoot like right off the whistle, or not
Yeah,
necessarily off the whistle, right in the beginning. He got to my legs. I was felt like I was wrestling folk style in the beginning. I did a leg pass and then come up and have like a leg, and I just decided to jump backwards on my back and give him four, and then I I don't know what changed. I kind of just flipped from, not really caring what the score is to I'm just gonna go. If
Yeah.
I see an opening, I'm just gonna go, and if he keeps scoring on me, then I guess I'll be going to U20s in a month. And if I can score some points, then it looks like I'll be wrestling Vito. So I kind of like I put in my Instagram caption, like I'm just gonna surrender the outcome. And I that's literally just what it was, before the match, during the match, and then even after the match, I was telling myself, the first thing I was telling myself was I don't think I wrestled the best of my ability. Like my immediate thought was I'm gonna have to wrestle better to wrestle Vito, to beat Vito. So it's one of those things, I don't know how I must have wrestled better than what I think, but I look forward to the next thing, and so it's gonna be Vito, and it's gonna be really tough. I know that.
Yeah, and winning the U.S. Open is awesome, but it is just a step in the process. And
Yeah.
Final X is June 14th. You'll take on Vito, who medaled in the past 2 years. He won gold in 2023. He won bronze last year. And
Hmm.
I honestly, I don't think Vito's too impressed himself with what he did last year after winning gold and then winning bronze this year or last year. I think he knows he has to be better, and you have to be better to beat Vito. What's your perspective looking forward? You have like a month and a half ish to get ready for that. Is it going to be a lot of focus on him or a lot of focus just on you and what you do?
Yeah. Well, so first the Pan Am Games or
Yeah.
Championships, I guess they're in 2 weeks. So
Okay.
right, my mindset right now is I'm gonna enjoy the next 2 3 days, back home. Then I'm gonna actually I have prom this weekend, so I'll be going to prom, and then from prom, actually Sunday, then I have the school and National Honor Society thing, and then I'm going right back down to Stillwater, getting ready for Pan Am's, and then right after Pan Am's, then I'm locking in 100% for Vito. I'm gonna do whatever the coaches feel like I need to do. If they tell me I need to focus on solely myself and they're going to figure out Vito and then help me with that, or if they're going to do the opposite, figure out Vito and then figure out what I got to do because of that, whatever that plan is, it worked last week and so I think, regardless of whether it works or not, that's who I'm trusting, and it's going to, like I said, it's going to be really, really hard, whether it's 12 or 18 minutes. I know it's going to be a battle. I know I'm going to have to be the absolute best version of Jax Forrest. And, if I am, I truly think I can win. But if I'm not 100%, it's going to be really, really tough to beat him.
Yeah, and I should ask too because I'm sure there's a lot of Cowboy fans listening, and we saw Fix go down with an injury in his I think quarterfinal. Do you
Hmm.
have any kind of update on how he's doing on his injury or anything like that?
Yeah, last time I was talking to him, I don't think he's going to need surgery, which is really good.
Awesome.
The one thing that he was, yeah, which is awesome. I really, it's really stinks for him. Obviously, I really like him. I really like his family, but it kind of, selfishly, for me, and I have some big things coming up. It kind of stinks that, such a good training partner, such
Yeah.
a brilliant wrestling mind, to say the least. He's one of the smartest wrestling minds I know. And, he was part of the reason I ended up going to Oklahoma State in the first place. Him and Coach Zoe were the first two people I knew out there. And, we kept in contact throughout the whole process. And, now that I'm there, now we're even closer training partners and, just can help each other. But, so I'm hoping he's back on the mat as soon as possible for himself and for me. But, regardless if he's on the mat or not, he's going to be one heck of a coach in the future. And, I'm hoping he stays and is can be around to helping me for a long, long time.
Yeah, for sure. And after the finals match with Gross, you get the Final X hat, you get the big
Mhm.
qualified sign, you get the pictures, and it's an awesome moment. And what I loved right after that I noticed Rotundo posted a photo of was right away you went to the Jesus shirt, pointing to
Mhm.
the shirt, making, reference like this is important to me. Talk to me about your faith and how important it is to you in your wrestling.
Yeah, I mean it's everything, it's something, that going right back to Dayton, he's helped me, find a really good church down in Stillwater, and it's really it's awesome. I have great churches. I did in back in North Carolina. I do in Pennsylvania, and I will in Oklahoma when I'm out there full time. But faith is, I mean, it's part of the reason why I wrestle, why I compete the way I do. I just wrestle furiously because I'm confident in my faith, whether I win or lose. I'm like I said earlier, I'm going to surrender the outcome, and I hope to heck that I win. But if I don't, I'm going to wake up the next morning and I'm going to do the same thing I would have done. But like I said, it's just, I've just been praying. I prayed so much before this tournament to just like have a peace of mind. And just anytime I felt like I was trying to almost force my will upon the world and doing like if I had a feeling that I should do something and I completely went and did the thing that I wanted to do instead, trying to just crave my own path instead of the one that's already paid for me. And I think that's something where I've gone wrong with in the past. When I've taken losses, when I've been struggling in school or relationships or anything, it's just when I've kind of wanted to chase my own glory, chase my own path. But this weekend, I felt like it was the best version of Jax Forrest that I've ever seen, and that I know the Lord is. That was just His plan for me to find this. And there were things about the weekend that were tough, teammates losing, my brother losing, but I just had to kind of regroup myself and stay focused on that God's plan is, everything right now is happening for a reason, and I'm not going to know that reason. Like, for example, 2 years ago in Vegas, I was the returning silver medalist, U17, and I broke my toe and ended up making the finals. And I was like, dude, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to make the world team on a broken toe. I'm going to go and I'm going to win worlds. But this so happened that I had Ben Vito, someone who was hungry to get there and who beat me 2 matches to 0. And I'm like, God, why? Why is this happening right now? Like I feel like I trained right. I feel like I was ready, but I was doing it too much for myself. Where this past weekend, I wrestle just crazy enough happens that I wrestle Ben in the semis. I'm completely different person, different mindset, different wrestler. End up getting the win. And then I'm kind of starting to see that what that plan was this whole time. So, it's something for little kids, who watch this or who know me or, who follow you, that, God's plan is there, and, you're going to take losses. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I've taken losses that I know I shouldn't have. But everything has kind of brought me to the point where I'm at right now. And it's going to bring you to the point where you're at right now and the point that you're going to be in 5 years in the future, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's a lot there. I feel like we could do a whole show on that. Just the peace that God gives you, and then the
Yeah.
plan, and how it's one of the greatest blessings when you do see, because you sometimes don't see why things happen the way they did. And when you do get a glimpse of it, and when you do see, oh wow, that's what you were doing, or oh wow, that's what you let happen, it's pretty cool.
Hmm.
And I'm curious too, you know, for you specifically, I was talking to a good friend of mine, Don Baschamania, yesterday, and he was saying, like, man, I don't think we've had a young prospect like this since Aaron Pico. Like it's been a while since there's somebody that has so much success. Here you are winning the Open as a high school junior. And what's crazy is the expectations are only going to get bigger. We see it already
Hmm.
with Bo Bassett. Bo drops a match in the semis, and
Hmm.
people are like, oh, what happened with Bo? Like, because you guys are so good, the expectations are so high. And I'm curious kind of how you block out that pressure and how you rely on your faith to kind of manage those highs and lows. Like,
Hmm.
you've already kind of answered this, but you talk about if you win or you don't win, you talk about your match with Vito at Pan Am's, all these things. And there's a lot of things you can control, and there's also a lot that you can't, and that you are
Hmm.
surrendering the outcome. And I'm curious how that all plays out.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've talked about at different times. It seems like every tournament, or we were doing good, and it seemed like there was a tournament. Bo would win, and then I would lose, and then the next one it would be flipped. So we've kind of gone through. We know what each other are feeling. We know how hard it is to lose when you feel like you've been doing everything right, and I think we having each other there helps a lot. And I think just the fact that we know that that's not everything. We know that we're going to have another big, big tournament coming up. We wrestle, we put it on the line about every single month at a big tournament.
Yeah.
So we know it's going to be an opportunity to redeem ourselves, whether it's against that same opponent that beat us, or whether it's against somebody who's really good. We're gonna find the best guys. And I know for Bo, he's gonna go to the senior trials in a couple weeks, and whether he wins or loses, I know he's gonna be hungry and he's gonna come out like he's never came out before. And then on top of that, he's gonna take that and then he's gonna go to U20s and he's gonna do the same thing. So it's like we know that we're going to just come back and we're just going to keep going. We know we're young. We know people have expectations and people talk online about a bunch of different nonsense stuff, but we know who we are. We know what we want to do, and we know that there's going to be ups and downs. So
Yeah.
just trust in that process, trust in that plan, that it's going to come back and we're going to know why it happened.
I am curious too, Jax. You crack me up because it's a blessing in my world. So when I put out a graphic and I'm like massive upset, so and so beats so and so, or this person beats this
Mm-hmm.
person, I hate it sometimes because it's like you develop relationships and you like kids
Mm-hmm.
where you're like, man, I'm rooting for Jax. I like this kid. And then if you lose and I have to put a graphic out like so and so beats
Yeah.
Jax, and there's a lot of kids that show a lot of maturity, and you're one of them where it's like you'll either comment on it or you'll post something funny. Kozak posted today that Flo put out a graphic or a post for like 61 kilo contenders, and you put out the little
Yeah.
graphic like sigh. I'm
Uh-huh.
curious at what goes into that, like rolling with the punches and not taking it. I think you do a great job of not taking social media too seriously, but also leveraging it for your brand in part of the whole process of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think I just do it just to kind of like almost laugh at myself, that I lost. And it's like, geez, what am I doing, man? Like, but it's kind of just acknowledging to myself that, people can go and make excuses. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I've made excuses. I was just talking about how I broke my toe a little bit ago. So, I still do that, but I like to err on the side of, yeah, that happened. And, I'm going to give the other guy props. He beat me or something like that. And I'm just going to use it to fuel my fire to come back and just be a better version of myself. That because that's all you can do. I'm gonna lose. I might lose in 2 weeks. I may lose in a month and a half against Vito. I may, who knows what's gonna happen. I may, you know, God willing, I never lose another wrestling match in my life. But unfortunately, that's most likely not gonna happen. I'm gonna take losses, and that's what's gonna help me continue to keep getting better and keep growing.
Yeah. By the way, win or lose with Vito, do you have? It's kind of like you mentioned Bo wanting to go U20s. For you, like, do you know win or lose against Vito if you're going to try to make other teams?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I'm guaranteed at least a U23 team.
Okay.
I think based off of national team, top three have a
Yep.
say of, if they want to be on the U23 team. I don't think it's the same for the U20 team. I'm not sure exactly what the rules are, but I've been told that, if I do lose to Vito, I'm at least going to be on the U23 team. So because of that, I'm just going to be focusing on trying to beat Vito, and I won't be doing the U20s most likely. So
I love the most
that's a
likely.
nice. Yeah, you never know. Who knows if this time David might crack down and be like, no, you're not doing that. Come on, what are you thinking this time? But because one of the things I was talking to David about was trying to do kind of like what Aiden Sinclair do, trying to do both seniors and juniors. And he was like, no, he was like, if you're going to do seniors, he's like, that way is too good to go there and compete. He's like, you're going there to win. So that was, it's nice to know I at least have at least a U23 team and I'm going to be going to Worlds again. But that doesn't stop my mindset from trying to be on the senior team as well.
Yeah, it's crazy what Aiden Sinclair did. Doing
Yeah,
I
it was
brought it up on the
crazy.
recap show. I'm like, I don't know if there's anybody who's runner up in both. Like you placed
Hmm.
that high in both, in the weight difference, like crazy. And I'd love to
Yeah,
see it. It's,
yeah, that was crazy. And I've known him for a while. We used to be on different dual teams growing up, and he's always been really good. So, I can't say I'm necessarily surprised, but it was pretty crazy.
yeah. And you mentioned Taylor, and going back to Oklahoma State, there's so much going on in Stillwater right now. Hendrickson and Hamidi just doing what some would think the unthinkable. Zahid taking out Dake at the Open. What's your perspective on what's going on in Stillwater? And it's awesome to hear that you're already spending so much time there. How excited are you to get there full time?
Yeah, it's been awesome. I when I'm down there, I stay with Landon and D, and we have other guys who coming in, Rockland Zinkin, Ronnie, Sergio. We were all at the house together, and Dre Sean, Ross. We were all together hanging out, and we're gonna be the guys that are gonna be there in a couple years. Plus other, you never know, transfers, other different recruits, decommitting, recommitting, all that different stuff. But, this is going to be our group of guys in a couple years. And, the coaches kind of talked and asked, how do we get along and everything. And, those, I love all those guys. We're already really close. We get each other. We are all supporting each other this weekend, making sure, we were good. If we needed anything, we had each other. And I think that just, it's a blessing, and then you got on top of that, I'm really good relationship with the coaches already with the different college guys, different transfers in, Troy and JJ and Casey, Daton, there's so many people there that I already have good relationships with. And, that's why I'm really excited. And, you never know what's going to happen with the future, but I think we're a team that can be really good in a couple years, and I'm definitely excited for that.
Yeah, the fans sure are excited. I mean, between all of you recruits that are committing there, what David Taylor's doing, the recent
Hmm.
success, there's definitely no shortage of hopium and like fandom excitement. But
Hmm.
before you head out there, you have one more year left at Bishop McCort, and
Hmm.
that school is. I feel like you're a part of something special there. I don't follow high
Oh
school
yeah.
wrestling too much, and I pay attention to it overall, especially as far as like recruiting and college impact and stuff like that. And it's hard to pay any amount of attention to high school wrestling and not hear of Bishop McCort. And you know, I'm curious your perspective on what it's like being a part of that. And it seems like it's truly as much of an iron sharpens iron position
Mm.
as a wrestler can be in.
Yeah, yeah, I feel like I've been in Stillwater so much, I kind of forget what it's like here, and then I come back and I'm like, man, this is pretty dang hard too. I love all these guys. I could go nonstop about everybody on the team. I've been around these guys the last 4-ish years, and these are my best friends. And it kind of stinks, knowing that I'm going to be going away and I'm going to be gone traveling and training a lot. But ultimately, I know that these guys, they would all, this is what they would want me to do. They're not, nobody here is selfish about themselves. We're all just want the best for ourselves and want the best for each other. And, it's, I can't wait for, to watch these guys wrestle and continue to keep competing. I know we already have, I'm on the U23 team looking to be on the senior team. Keegan Bassett just made his first world team. We have a girl, Jordan Faust, who's on the world team. And then I know we got Bo, we got Sam, we got Melvin. All these guys are going to be looking to make teams. And, we're going to be going hard and we're going to be bringing everything we got. And on top of that, we're going to have fun. There's a little cliff diving place, about 15 minutes from our house. And I'm sure I'm probably going to be there about every day. I'm here hanging out with the guys and all this stuff. And, that's just what makes it so special. We're not just wrestlers, you know, we wrestle a lot, don't get me wrong, but we're just like normal kids off the mat. We hang out, we go to eat, we go to Bible studies on Wednesdays. We're just, we're here to, live life and, be good wrestlers on the mat.
It's crazy too because you look at like Sam Herring's committed to Penn State. You're
Hmm.
committed to Oklahoma State.
Oh yeah.
You got Bo's committed to Iowa. You got guys committing to all of the top programs on one team. I feel like a lot of
Hmm.
high school teams, it's like you really rally around a guy who breaks through and commits
Hmm.
to one of those top programs. And you guys, I mean, you guys have wrestlers committed to literally the top three programs in the country with Iowa, Oklahoma
Hmm.
State, and Penn State. What's that like of having a room where there is? I feel like sometimes when guys get to college, there's that. especially like, let's say some of the Penn State guys that I have on, they're like, they come from being the star at their high school program to you walk into a room where you're just average amongst the rest of them. And for you guys,
Yeah.
you kind of have that early, where even before you get to college, you're already in a room with so many guys who have the big profiles, have a lot of attention, have the big commitments. What's that dynamic like in the room?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much like a college room. We have guys that are gonna go D1 that you people don't even know about that would be the top dogs if they were in just about any other room. And
Yeah.
we have guys that push us that are still young and maybe don't start, but they're pretty good. And I know once we graduate, they're going to be taken over, and people are going to be like, "Geez, this guy, we've never heard of him." But we're a really deep team. We're a really close knitted team, and like I said, we got guys going to the best schools, and we train hard with each other, and off the mat we hang out. It's the I mean, it's pretty much just like another college room. It's fun. It's different, obviously, a little more unstructured. We just go in there and beat each other up the whole times, but that's why what we do on the mat is what we do.
You've accomplished so much in high school, and now it feels like you're starting to really get that itch for that next level of success, which is why you went to the Open. When you have a year left in high school, what's that balance like of having that itch for senior level, for college, but also still wanting to finish strong with what you have going on there?
Yeah, I think the big part is, I'm still motivated. Our team, we didn't win. We didn't win the team race last year. We were the number 2 team in the country. I want to make all these guys the best possible that they can be. I want our team to be the number 1 team in the country, and I want my college team to be the number 1 team in the country. I'm really competitive, and on top of that, like I said, these are my best friends, and if I can go out there and compete and spend as much time with them as possible, I'd love that. And then the other reason is my younger brother Jameson. He's going to be really good. He won PJWs this year, placed the Super 32. He's going to be a freshman next year, and I want to pretty much be I want to be his training partner. I want to be kind of his coach for the next year. I want to make him to be just as good, or I mean, if he could be better than me, man, I would know I did something right. I'd be proud, and that's what I want. I want nothing more than just to see him do everything I did and better. Because he's my little brother. I love him to death, and I think that's part of a big reason I want to stay. I got a big family. We're really close. We moved from North Carolina to Pennsylvania. My dad. I want to milk as much time of him being my coach before he gets kicked out of the corner by Coach David, but and then my mom, my siblings, brothers, sisters, it's all, I love my family. I love my teammates and my coaches, and it's hard to leave them. So I don't want to unless I absolutely have to. But like I said, I got Vito coming up, and I know I got to do what I got to do to beat him. And that's gonna be sometime here. It's gonna be sometime there, and we're gonna go from there.
I love it. And last question before we get to some rapid fan questions.
Oh yeah.
You're young, but man, between the way you wrestled, maturity, and I think even your responses in this, in this episode, like your maturity goes beyond your age. I'm curious who your biggest influences have been on your development to have this level of maturity.
Yeah, I think I my dad has been a big part of it. He's kind of been there for me since the beginning. But growing up, being from North Carolina, I traveled a lot. So a lot of the things I just kind of figured out on my own, through different coaches. I'd pick something up from, Josh Kinnick was my coach for a while, Chris Ramos, just growing up, I had so many different coaches, and I would just learn so many different things. And I would just take something from everybody. And I think being more on my own when I was younger, instead of, being just a dumb little kid, I wanted to be the best. So I kind of looked at everything. I was always different. When I was younger, I never played with toys or, anything. I was always, around sports and wanted to watch sports and everything. And So I kind of grew up a little bit different, more just developed. And don't get me wrong, I mean, if you ask my friends, they'd probably say I'm the most immature guy in the world. Just
That's usually how it
being, I'm just,
goes.
yeah, I'm just, I'm a kid who, this is my job. I'm a wrestler, and, I'm just more advanced. I put in a lot of time, a lot of work where I'm at now. And, with that comes, I have to be mature. I can't be making all these dumb mistakes and getting in trouble and all these things when I want to be what I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's get some fan Q&A before I let
Oh
you
yeah.
go here.
Yeah.
By the way, I will say too, I'd almost be remiss not to ask you about NIL. And dude, it's you had a Cadillac. Like that's awesome. What is that like?
Yeah.
Like in a sport that is very small, very niche, not a lot of money, and here you guys are kind of changing the games. And now, like I saw your post of getting a Cadillac. I'm like, dude, this is
Hmm.
awesome. What is that like?
Yeah. Yeah. It's part of just the story of my life. Crazy things happen. It just so happened I grew up at the perfect time where NIL and things were kind of coming in. I started getting recruited when Coach David was getting brought into Oklahoma State, which brought in a lot of new fans, new people who, want to see Oklahoma State succeed. And, I was able to be a really good wrestler. It's all God's plan. And, I'm way too fortunate for, who I am. I feel like there's other people who, are way less fortunate who deserve, part of what I have or more. So, I needed to, even though I know I have a nice car, I have so many great things going on in my life. I have to stay grounded or the immaturity will come out and I'll start, thinking I'm better than what I am, or start thinking just I rule the world where the only one who rules the world is God and, Jesus. And so it's like, I want to make sure that somebody who I never become somebody who I'm not. I want to be who I am. And, whether I have a nice car, whether I have a lot of money, whether I have all the NIL deals in the world, I just want to be Jax Forrest. That's, going forward, what I'm going to continue to ground myself with.
I love that. All right, let's get some fan questions answered here. Starting with who was the toughest wrestler you've ever faced?
Ever. Oh, man. Ooh. In matches, I mean, I used to have some battles when I was younger. I know Nate Jessaroga, that best of three series when I in 2022, that one was insane. He was so strong, so fast, but there's been so many guys I can't even. He's just the one that sticks out because that was one of the matches I was not expecting to win at all, and somehow I did.
You're getting a lot of questions in here for your favorite ice cream. A lot.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome. Well, actually, right before I got on this, I went to the store, got some ice cream, ate most of it, and then there's just a little bit sitting next to me, but it's the Ben and Jerry's s'mores right there.
That honestly sounds pretty good right now. Like,
Oh yeah, it says, let's see, toasted marshmallow ice cream with chocolate cookie swirls, graham cracker swirls, and fudge flakes. And
how do you go
that's
wrong with
my
that?
yeah, it's my guilty pleasure. Anytime after a tournament, I got about 3 days to eat it before I got to start getting back ready to wrestle. Back to that competition mindset.
Do you know if you want to redshirt your freshman year yet?
I would. I mean, I hope. I hope not. I think I'm ready. I wanna wrestle as much as I can, as often as I can, and not wait. I'm not very patient. That's something I got to work on. But I like I said earlier, I really trust the coaches, and if they truly think that's the best at heart for me and interest, then I think I would agree with them.
This one just says, why Spartan Combat?
I love Spartan. The guy Nick and Joe. I was fortunate enough to be with them at NCAA's a lot, and they're really good people. And geez, the gear is awesome. I really like the shirts, the shoes you see me wearing. The Digs, the Yannis. They're super super comfortable, easy to wear. It's different. It's not Rudis. It's not Nike. It's not Adidas. It's not one of those big name ones, but I think the quality is really good. I love the singlets. And I mean, it's different like me, I'm not mainstream. I'm not just a, you know, showboat, I guess. I just like to stay on the side and, they talked to them after Fargo and, figured out real quick how good of people they were and they have really good gear, so it was awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like a no-brainer. What are some ways you improve your wrestling while off the mat, not on?
hmm Yeah, I think just talking, a lot of talking to my coaches, a lot of watching wrestling. I've probably watched my match with Nashon and Seth and Davino probably about 30 times already, just trying to figure out what I need to do better. Even though I got the win, I gave up 8 points and I only scored four against Ben. So, figuring out those little tiny things to just continue to get better. And then obviously off the mat, you can live, you can work out, circuit training. We do a lot of that here. And, it's whatever you can put your mind to.
Speaking of circuit training and those 5 a.m.s, we got a question here from Bo Bassett that simply says, how is Jax Forrest so slick and sly? That's the question.
Probably too much wrestling with Bo. He's so strong and quick. I gotta do something. I am not gonna out muscle him, outpace him. So I gotta figure out a different way to try and score on him.
Plans for future tattoos? Question mark.
Not sure. I know I got into Star Wars a lot recently. A couple months ago, I got a concussion and I wasn't allowed to do anything. So I kind of just sat in bed and decided to watch all the Star Wars movies. So there may be something in Star Wars down the road. I'm going to continue to keep getting different Bible verses that I really feel like can change my life and change others that see them. That's one of the really cool things about being who I am is I have people who see my tattoos, see what I stand for, and tell me how it changed their life, and really makes me feel like I'm just a vessel for God, and I don't want to put things on my body that are complete waste. Obviously, I have an ice cream cone on me, so that one might not have been the smartest idea, but I I don't have any regrets with that one. But just going forward, I want to make sure not too crazy. But
Having scripture on your body holds you accountable too. I got a verse above.
oh yeah,
I got a verse on each of my ankles, like just above my shoe. So even if I'm just like wearing socks and sneakers,
yeah,
you can see them, and somebody will be
hmm
walking behind you, and it's crazy because they'll say something, and I got one on my wrist too, Romans 5:8, and it's like it.
oh yeah,
You sometimes, I don't want to say you forget you have them, but then somebody will say something to you, and you're like, oh yeah, that is. It holds you
yeah,
accountable. Matt
yeah. And I gotta
Boss
make sure
here.
I got.
What's
Oh,
that?
yeah, yeah. I was just saying, I gotta. I know every Bible verse I have in my body. I know I have to memorize it. 100%. That's. I feel like if I don't, somebody asks me, and I'm like, oh wait, let me think about this. I just feel like that's a bad look. So if it's there, it's gonna be really meaningful for sure.
For sure. Matt Boss wants to know how you're so flexible.
I don't know. I think it's I don't have a whole lot of muscle. I got long arms, long legs. I was born more flexible, more able to move, but I stretch a lot, and do different sauna stretches. And just when I'm wrestling, my brain turns off and I just can just do weird things. So,
I gotta get more flexible. My kids will try to like roll around, and I'm like, guys,
yeah,
I can't like go in this
yeah,
position. I can't.
uh-huh.
Here's one. How do you deal with the strength gap wrestling guys way older than you?
I try and use I first off, I don't think about it. The first time Nashon grabbed me, I did, and I was like, holy cow, this dude is insanely strong. But I don't try and outmuscle anybody that I know is strong. I try and almost get out of the way. I do my all the moves that I do, I just do them a little bit different where it can kind of catch people off guard, and
Yeah.
their strength isn't as strong in positions they're not normally in.
This one seems awfully specific. Will you ever forget about Logan Arnold?
I will not. No, he goes to our school. I can forgive me. He was on our wrestling team. He's a good dude. I like Logan.
um, Man, there's so many. You just go on and on. Do you have any thought towards UFC after wrestling?
I've kind of thought about it. I know I don't like getting punched that much, but it definitely could be something in the future. I want to wrestle as long as I can, but I know I've had different people tell me I should try jujitsu, try those other martial arts. So, it might be in the future, if some things change or I just get a change of heart, but I definitely wouldn't be opposed to it. That's for sure.
We'll do a few final ones here. Currently, what is your number one goal in wrestling?
Well, right now I want to stay present. I want to be I want to be a Pan Am champ, and then going forward, I want to win Final X, go to Worlds, and go ahead win Worlds, and then I'm gonna start changing back up and figuring out what I want to do going forward. But short term, those are the big three things that I have circled.
This one says, did your slide by come naturally or did you practice it a lot?
It came naturally. I've always kind of been a more slide by guy, but I would do the normal ones over top, different arm drags, different shrugs. But I was wrestling a kid when I was probably fifth grade. Loved inside tie, and I felt it and I went with it. And ever since then, man, it's been my number one go-to move. And I obviously continue to keep developing it. It's not the same, and it's not going to be the same in 3 years. I'm going to keep changing, keep figuring out ways to keep hitting it on people.
This one's funny. Has winning the U.S. Open helped you find a prom date for next weekend?
I have a girlfriend, so she was actually in Vegas with me, and she was really happy, and so I think I'm good. I asked her a little bit ago, and she said yes, so I'm excited for that.
Oh man! All right, final one here. Favorite post weigh-in snack? We all know ice creams after tournament.
Yep, ice cream. Unfortunately, I'd be in trouble if I got caught eating ice cream after weigh-ins, but I love I really like Starbucks after weigh-ins. I get either the egg bites, they have the egg, cheese, and bacon ones. Those are really good. Or just like a sandwich from there. The bacon, egg, and cheese ones. They have, turkey, pesto, and cheese. They got some good options. I'm not a big coffee drinker, but their sandwiches are pretty good.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right, Jax. Any final words here before I let you go, man? I appreciate you making the time. I know you just got home, and I appreciate you coming on,
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, no, just thank you for having me on. It was good talking about it, getting some words out rather than just trying to keep them all in. So I appreciate that.
There was one question I scrolled past that I forgot to ask, and now I'm just thinking about it. Are you going to set a profile picture soon? It's just black.
Yeah, I don't know. I've gone back and forth between having one and then, I lose a match and I just get mad at myself. So I'm like, no profile picture. You're just gonna be black now.
Do you
But
get one now that you won the Open? Like, I mean, that deserves one.
maybe, yeah, maybe. Sometimes I'll put it to a weird one. There was a point of time, like a year and a half ago, where like each day I would just pick a random picture from my profile and just put it up there. So we'll see. I might have to bring that one back, but we'll see about that.
I love it. All right, Jax, thank you so much. And I'll
You
link up
got
his
it.
social in the description, so you guys should definitely follow him. He's a great follow on social,
Yeah,
Instagram, Twitter,
thank you.
all that. All
Mhm.
right, Jax, best of luck at Pan Am's. Best of
Thank
luck
you.
at Final X, and we'll talk soon, man.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it again.
See you, man. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thank you.
And the beat goes on.